Make yourself comfortable. If you are here, it means your strategy of being a good guy has suffered a collapse. You are disappointed that the world does not repay you with reciprocity for your politeness and diligence. This is logical. In the biological and social hierarchy, politeness without strength is a signal of surrender. You are not a participant in the game. You are a piece of scenery against which the true predators divide resources. I am not here to comfort you. My task is to dissect your weakness and show how the mechanisms of your psyche make you invisible. We will use the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche not as a classroom theory, but as a scalpel for opening social reality. Forget about morality. Morality is a leash that the weak put on the strong so that the strong do not eat them. However, if you are not strong, this leash suffocates only you. Today, we begin your transformation from a resource into someone who is impossible to ignore. Chapter 1. The Vacuum of Presence. The Art of Disrupting Others' Expectations 1. Phase. The Collision. A boardroom in the City of London. Panoramic windows reflect a cold gray sky that seems to be an extension of the steel table. Arthur, a senior analyst, sits on the edge of his chair. His back is tense. His fingers almost imperceptibly pick at the edge of a folder. Opposite him is James, a managing partner. James does not look at Arthur. He scrolls through notifications on his phone, occasionally taking a sip of cold espresso. The silence in the room becomes thick, almost tangible. It presses upon Arthur, making him feel like a superfluous object in this interior. "So, Arthur," James says without raising his eyes. Subtext. I am giving you 30 seconds before I forget about your existence again. Your time is worth nothing. I have familiarized myself with your report. We have decided to give this project to the marketing department. You are dismissed. Arthur feels a lump forming in his throat. His brain feverishly searches for words of justification. But I spent 3 months on the analysis, he begins, and his voice betrayingly trembles on a high note. Subtext. Please notice my efforts. I need your approval to feel alive. James does not even interrupt his activity. He simply makes a gesture with his hand, a short, barely noticeable movement, as if shooing away a bothersome insect. The matter is closed. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. What happened in this scene? From the perspective of ethology, James applied a strategy of social erasure. When James ignores eye contact, he activates ancient mechanisms of anxiety in Arthur's brain. For a primate, exile from the group, or being ignored by the leader, meant death. At this moment, Arthur's amygdala sends an SOS signal. The level of cortisol skyrockets, blocking the prefrontal cortex, the zone responsible for logic and strategic thinking. Arthur fell into the trap of the freeze response. His attempt to justify himself, "I spent 3 months," is a classic mistake of a subordinate. He attempts to appeal to justice, which does not exist in this room. In the eyes of James, Arthur now looks like biological waste that transmits weakness through micro-expressions. Raised eyebrows, a sign of submission, and an accelerated tempo of speech. 3. Phase. Psychological Precedent. Let us recall the famous experiment by Solomon Asch, 1951, on conformity. A subject was placed in a group of Confederates who unanimously gave an incorrect answer to an obvious question about the length of lines. In 75% of cases, the subjects agreed with the group, even while seeing the truth with their own eyes. Why? Because the fear of being in isolation, the fear of not corresponding to a social norm, is stronger than the drive for truth. Arthur in this scene is a typical Ash subject. He agrees with his role as a victim because his psyche fears conflict with authority. A real-life example. Recall the story of Robert Greene, who, before becoming a best-selling author, worked in Hollywood. His ideas were stolen. He was ignored in meetings. He was a good guy until he realized that his politeness was an invitation to aggression. In one of the studios, his boss, let us call him Mr. Sterling, systematically forgot to invite Robert to key meetings. Robert did not complain. The next time, he entered Sterling's office at the moment of an important call, sat in the guest chair, and silently looked at him without taking his eyes away for 10 minutes. He did not utter a single word. He created an information vacuum that Sterling could not fill. A shift occurred in the hierarchy. The one who remains silent and watches controls the situation. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. Nietzsche wrote, "Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the overman. To become the one who is impossible to ignore, one must stop being an animal that seeks the leader's approval." Lesson number 1. The principle of total disconnection. Arthur should have applied the will to power through silence. When James said, "You are dismissed," Arthur should not have begun to justify himself, but rather fallen silent. Strategy of the counterstrike. Spatial seizure. Do not jump up. Change the posture to a more relaxed and expansive one. Visual capture. Look at the bridge of James's nose until he raises his eyes. This will force James to feel biological discomfort. Radical pragmatism. Instead of justifications, pronounce a phrase that puts the competence of the leader in doubt. James, transferring the project to marketing will destroy profitability by 12%. Are you ready to explain this to the board of directors at the end of the quarter? Or shall we discuss the risks now? Subtext. I do not care about your attitude toward me, but I am the only one ensuring your backside from failure. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. The air in the office is dry, smelling of expensive perfume and ozone from the functioning equipment. The silence after Arthur's phrase must become cold, like ice at the bottom of the ocean. In this silence, only the steady ticking of the wall clock is heard, a sound that counts down the seconds until the moment when James is the first to avert his gaze. The light of the lamps is reflected in Arthur's eyes, turning them into two emotionless lenses, recording every facial contraction on the opponent's face. You have learned the first lesson. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of a threat. However, silence alone is not enough to rebuild the hierarchy for yourself. A predator is always on guard when he sees strength. To truly crush an opponent, you must make him believe that he has already won. You must offer him your neck in order to bite through his own at the moment of the strike. We move to the strategy that Nietzsche called the mask. A strong spirit needs a mask so as not to be torn apart by mediocrity prematurely. We shall call this the engineering of false vulnerability. Chapter 2. The trap of sincerity. The art of controlled falling one. Phase. The collision. A private club in Mayfair. The interior is in the Art Deco style. Plenty of polished wood, heavy velvet, and subdued amber light. Ethan, a brilliant architect, sits opposite Victoria, the owner of the largest development holding. She is the iron lady of the industry, whose management style resembles carpet bombing. Ethan holds his whiskey glass by the bottom part, allowing his fingers to tremble slightly. His tie is a bit loosened, his gaze is unfocused. Subtext. I am on the verge of a breakdown. I am tired of fighting. I am defenseless before you. Ethan. Victoria leans back against the leather sofa, a barely noticeable triumphant smile touching her lips. Subtext. I smell your blood. At last, you have broken. Your delays on the vertical project are costing us millions. You were always too artistic for this business. Perhaps you should admit that you are not coping. Ethan takes a deep breath. His shoulders drop. Perhaps you are right, Victoria, he says quietly. His voice sounds muffled. I made a personal mistake. There is something in the Foundation documentation that I hid from the inspectors. If this comes to light, the project will be closed, and I will lose my license. I do not know what to do. Subtext. I am giving you the nuclear detonator of my life. Now you are my god. Victoria freezes. A predatory gleam flashes in her eyes. She leans forward, invading his personal space. Tell me everything, in detail. 2. Phase. Psychological X-ray. Ethan has just performed surgical surgery on Victoria's ego. He applied false vulnerability to provoke a cognitive capture. When we see another person's weakness, our brain produces dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward. For Victoria, Ethan's weakness is a resource that can be privatized. At this moment, she stops analyzing Ethan as a threat. Her critical thinking turns off, replaced by a feeling of superiority. The dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, is involved here. Victoria, possessing pronounced narcissistic traits, cannot resist the opportunity to possess someone else's secret. This is a form of social grooming. She cleanses the victim of secrets in order to control him completely. From the perspective of physiology, Victoria's seeking system in the hypothalamus is activated. She no longer sees a person in Ethan. She sees a case that must be cracked open. She makes a classic mistake: the overestimation of control. 3. Phase. Psychological precedent. In social psychology, there is an effect known as the pratfall effect, discovered by Elliot Aronson in 1966. Its essence is that a highly competent person becomes more attractive and inspires more trust if he or she makes a small mistake. However, Ethan uses a dark version of this effect. He does not simply drop a cup of coffee, he imitates a fatal vulnerability. This refers us to the experiments of Stanley Milgram on obedience to authority, but in a reverse vector. Victoria takes on the role of executioner, believing that Ethan is the victim, completely subordinate to her will. She does not understand that the role of victim is a script written by Ethan. Real-life example. In the 1920s, the legendary con artist Victor Lustig, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower, used this technique against Al Capone. Lustig borrowed $50,000 from Capone for a highly profitable deal, hid them in a safe for 2 months, and then returned them to Capone with a bowed head, stating, "The deal failed. I am ruined. Here is your money to the cent. Kill me if you must." Capone, accustomed to everyone deceiving or fearing him, was so struck by Lustig's honesty and weakness that he himself gave him $5,000 for sustenance. Lustig got what he wanted without risking anything. He created an illusion of vulnerability to turn off the predator's paranoia. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. Nietzsche asserted, "What is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil." In this context, love is the passion for power. Ethan does not love Victoria. He loves power over her. Lesson number 2. The principle of the deadly hook. False vulnerability is bait. The secret that Ethan revealed is actually disinformation or a trap. As soon as Victoria attempts to use this compromising evidence against him, she will discover that evidence is fabricated. She will expose herself to charges of blackmail or slander. Reactivity. She has already invested her emotions and resources into this secret, becoming an accomplice. Strategy of the counterstrike. Creating dependency. Ethan makes Victoria feel like his savior. This is the highest form of manipulation. Subtext. Now we are in the same boat, Victoria. And if I go to the bottom, I will pull you with me, because you now know about the crime and have hidden it. Intercepting the initiative. As soon as Victoria relaxes, considering Ethan her slave, he strikes at her assets, which she forgot about while being preoccupied with his weakness. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. It becomes stifling in the club. The smell of expensive tobacco mixes with the scent of old paper and Victoria's perfume, heavy with notes of patchouli and metal. Ethan watches her through his eyelashes. He sees how her pupils dilate, a biological marker of arousal from power. He feels cold sweat on his back, but it is not the sweat of fear, but the sweat of a hunter who has lain in ambush for 3 hours. The world around shrinks to the size of this deal. Outside, beyond the window, London continues its run. But here, in this amber cocoon, a new reality has just been born, where the predator has become the prey without even noticing it. Have you already felt this taste? The taste of how reality begins to bend under your gaze. But to become the one who is impossible to ignore, you must learn not only to change the behavior of those around you, but to seize their foundation, their perception of reality. Nietzsche proclaimed, "There are no facts, only interpretations." If you control the interpretation, you own the world of that person. We move to the most dangerous strategy, radical perspectivism, or the art of controlled destruction of reality. If you recognized yourself or your past reactions in the described patterns or behaviors of the characters, put a plus in the comments. This is not a sign of weakness, but the first signal that your brain has begun the process of deconstructing old habits. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Doubt. How to erase another's confidence. 1. Phase, the collision. A private party in a penthouse on Manhattan. The clinking of crystal, muffled jazz, and the smell of expensive tobacco. Oliver, a man whose presence in the room is felt as a drop in pressure, stands by the window. Grace approaches him, a socialite accustomed to dictating rules in her circle. Oliver. She touches his shoulder, her voice sounding authoritative. "We agreed that you would introduce me to the curator from MoMA this evening. Are you playing your games again?" Subtext. I remember your promise, and I demand its fulfillment. You are my debtor. Oliver slowly turns around. His face is a mask of absolute, almost sympathetic calmness. He does not remove her hand, but he does not react to the contact either. "Grace," he says, making a long pause between the words. "We discussed this last Thursday, and it was you who said that it was premature and vulgar. Are you sure that with your schedule you are not confusing me with someone else?" Subtext. Your memory is garbage. You are losing your grip. I am the only one here who maintains sanity. Grace freezes. A shadow of confusion flickers in her eyes. She remembers that conversation exactly. Or does she not? No, I remember clearly. Her voice loses its firmness for a moment. Your memory was always your weak point, Grace. Oliver takes a step closer, entering her intimate zone but looking over her head. Perhaps you should rest more. Your anxiety is beginning to affect your perception of facts. Subtext: you did not just make a mistake. You are ill. Surrender, and I will become your crutch. 2. Phase: psychological X-ray. Oliver uses classic gaslighting, but at a high strategic level. He does not simply deny a fact. He creates cognitive dissonance. When a person faces a contradiction between their memory and the confident statement of a significant other, the brain experiences stress. The hippocampus, memory center, enters into conflict with the prefrontal cortex. At this moment, cortisol is released, which with prolonged exposure literally blocks the ability for rational retrieval of memories. Grace is introduced into a state of informational weightlessness. Oliver strikes at the most sensitive thing, her identity, your weak point. This forces Grace to doubt not Oliver, but herself. As soon as the victim admits the possibility of their error, they give the aggressor the right to edit reality. 3. Phase: psychological precedent. In the 1990s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus conducted a series of experiments called Lost in the Mall. She was able to instill in healthy people false memories that they had been lost in a shopping center in childhood, even though this had never happened. An authoritative confirmation from relatives and a small number of details were sufficient. The brain is not a video camera. It is a storyteller that constantly rewrites the script. If you introduce edits to this script with sufficient coldness and confidence, the victim will accept them as their own. Oliver knows. In the social hierarchy, the one who is right is not the one who remembers the truth, but the one who transmits their version with the greatest neurobiological certainty. Real-life example. Look at how top political strategists or corporate raiders behave. When they are caught in a lie, they do not justify themselves. They attack the memory of the opponent. This never happened. You need to check your vision/hearing/psyche. They do not defend themselves. They change the landscape of the battle. A person who doubts their sanity cannot fight. 4. Phase: counter-strike. Nietzsche preached the will to power as the only truth. In Oliver's world, truth is a tool, not a constant. Lesson number 3. The principle of editing the past. To be impossible to ignore, you must become the source of reality for those around you. If you force them to doubt their own conclusions, they will come to you for answers. Strategy of the counter-strike. Total calmness. No aggression in the voice. Aggression is a sign of defense. Your tone must be the tone of a doctor informing a patient of an incurable disease. Cold and objective. Appeal to condition. Always link the mistake of the victim to their emotional state. You are just tired. You are reacting too sharply. This deprives their word of power. False care. Conclude the attack with an act of pseudo-support. This will create an emotional hook. Subtext: the world is dangerous and incomprehensible. Only I will help you understand everything. 5. Phase: sensory immersion. The light in the penthouse seems too bright, whitening the faces of the guests to the state of masks. Oliver feels the firmness of the expensive parquet under his feet, while it seems to Grace that the floor under her begins to vibrate slowly. The air between them vibrates with tension, as if before a lightning strike. In the reflection of the window, Oliver sees Grace adjusting her hair, a gesture of uncertainty, a micro-signal of surrender. He won without uttering a single rude word. He simply stole her own past from her. Your compassion is your main vulnerability. It is an atavism left over from times when the survival of an individual depended on the loyalty of the tribe. But in the modern world, the tribe is an illusion created so that it is more convenient to shear the sheep. While you empathize with others, they use your empathy as a lever to force you to work for their goals. Nietzsche said, "The overman is he who has defeated the human within himself." By human, he meant precisely this weakness: attachment, pity, and moral duty. Today we will learn to see people not as personalities, but as functional modules. Welcome to the world where there are no friends. There are only temporary comrades and expendable material. Chapter 4. Radical Pragmatism, the Biology of Social Engineering 1. Phase: The Collision. An art gallery of contemporary art in Chelsea. White walls, blinding light, and a sterile emptiness in which the clicking of heels echoes. William, a rising star in the world of venture investments, stands at an installation of broken glass. Beside him is Henry, his old university friend, who helped William obtain his first major contract by sharing confidential information. Henry looks depressed. His shoulders are slumped, and dark shadows lie under his eyes. Subtext: I have come for support. I am counting on our friendship, for I risked much for you. William. Henry's voice sounds quiet. The tax authorities have begun an audit of that deal. If they prove the leak, I will lose everything. I need your lawyers and perhaps a temporary loan to cover the cash gap. William slowly adjusts the cuff of his perfectly ironed shirt. He does not look at Henry. He looks through him at the curator of the exhibition, an influential billionaire standing at the other end of the hall. Subtext: You have ceased to be useful. Your problems are now an infection that I do not want to catch. Henry. William pronounces in a steady voice devoid of intonation. This is unfortunate. However, my lawyers deal with the matters of the fund, not private incidents. As for the loan... A short pause. William finally shifts his gaze to Henry, and this gaze is colder than the ice in his glass. My analytical department considers your position toxic. Investing in wreckage is a bad strategy. You surely understand it is nothing personal, just a calculation. Subtext: You were a good stepping stone, but I have already climbed higher. Now you are trash that must be thrown away so as not to stain my shoes. 2. Phase: Psychological X-ray. William demonstrated functional devaluation. From the perspective of social neurobiology, he consciously suppressed the activity of his anterior cingulate cortex, the zone responsible for empathy and empathizing with the pain of another person. When we look at a friend, our brain processes his image through this social cognition network. But William switched the mode of perception to instrumental thinking. At this moment, Henry for him is not a person with a history and feelings, but a malfunctioning tool. Testosterone comes into play here. A high level of this hormone, characteristic of dominant individuals, reduces sensitivity to oxytocin, the hormone of attachment. William biologically blocks sympathy in order to preserve his resources. He understands. Helping Henry is a minus deal. Empathy in this case is a tax on stupidity that William refuses to pay. 3. Phase: Psychological Precedent. In 2006, neuroscientists Lasana Harris and Susan Fisk conducted a study using functional magnetic resonance imaging. They discovered that when people look at photographs of representatives of low social groups, the homeless or drug addicts, their medial prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that is activated during interaction with other people, remains inactive. The brain literally processes these people as inanimate objects, such as trash cans or stones. William brought this ability to an absolute. He learned to turn on objectification toward anyone who pulls him down, regardless of past closeness. He uses the strategy of moral disengagement, described by Albert Bandura. William does not consider himself evil. He simply considers himself effective. He transferred Henry from the person category to the liability category, and liabilities are subject to being written off. 4. Phase. Counterstrike. Nietzsche wrote, "Life is something that must surpass itself. If your social connections hinder your ascent, they must be cut off without hesitation." Lesson number 4. The principle of the hierarchy of resources. To become the one who is impossible to ignore, you must learn to conduct an audit of your environment with the ruthlessness of a surgeon. Strategy of the counterstrike. Functional analysis. Every time someone asks you for a favor or attention, ask the question, what long-term benefit will I receive from this investment? If the answer is none, refuse immediately. Emotional sterilization. Practice the look through. In conflict or supplicant situations, focus on the physical details of the object, a button on the coat, the color of the tie, rather than the expression in their eyes. This blocks mirror neurons and prevents empathy from capturing your brain. Radical rejection of debt. Remember that gratitude is a social construct for manipulation. If Henry helped William in the past, he did it for his own benefit, hoping for reciprocal loyalty. His bet did not pay off. This is his mistake, not your debt. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. The gallery smells of fresh paint and expensive fabric softener. The air is so clean that it seems rarefied, as in the mountains. William feels how the cold of the champagne in the glass is transferred to his palm, creating a pleasant contrast with the dry warmth of the room. Henry before him seems like a gray spot against the background of the dazzling white wall. William takes a sip, and the gas bubbles tingle his tongue. This is the only thing he feels. He turns around and walks away, leaving Henry standing in a silence that now belongs only to the losers. We have reached the finale. If you have passed through the previous stages, your old personality, the one that craved to be understood and to be accepted, must be dead. You no longer seek a place at the table. You yourself become the table. Nietzsche proclaimed, "Life for me is the will to power. Not to force, not to violence, but precisely to power as the ability to impose one's will on chaos and force others to see the world through your eyes." The 5th strategy is the culmination. We shall call it the center of gravity. Chapter 5. The will to power. Becoming the sun one. Phase. The collision. A charity auction at an estate in the Hamptons. The air is saturated with the smell of sea salt, expensive cigars, and cold champagne. In the center of attention is Marcus, a titan of the industry, around whom a crowd of sycophants always swarms. He laughs loudly, gestures, dominates the space with sound and movement. Subtext. Look at me. I am the boss here. I am the source of life and money in this circle. Edward enters the hall. He is not in a hurry. He does not go to Marcus to pay his respects. He stops by a distant column, takes a glass of water, and simply observes. His posture is relaxed, but a compressed spring is felt within it. He does not seek anyone's gaze. Internal monologue. Marcus is spending too much energy. He is bustling. He fears silence because in silence he will cease to exist. I will wait until his noise burns out. 10 minutes later, the crowd's attention begins to dissipate. People notice Edward. His immobility against the background of general vanity frightens and attracts simultaneously. Sarah, a key investor whom Marcus tried to charm all evening, throws a short glance at Edward, then another. Marcus notices this. His voice becomes a tone higher. Subtext: "Why are you not looking at me? I am still here." He heads toward Edward, trying to absorb him with his presence. "Edward!" Marcus slaps him on the shoulder too hard. "Why are you in the shadows? We are discussing the future of the market here. What do you think about it?" Subtext: "I will drag you into the light and show everyone that you are nothing compared to me." Edward slowly shifts his gaze to Marcus's hand on his shoulder. He is silent for 3 seconds. The silence becomes unbearable. Marcus involuntarily removes his hand. "I think, Marcus," Edward pronounces barely audibly, forcing those around him to lean forward to hear, "that you are too busy with the future of the market to notice how it has already left from under your feet." Subtext: "You are yesterday. Your noise is the death rattle. I am the reality that you fear." 2. Phase: psychological X-ray. Edward applied the strategy of social gravity. In any group, attention is currency. Marcus tried to earn it through aggressive expansion, loud voice, gestures. Edward, however, created a vacuum of attention. From the perspective of neurobiology, the human brain is tuned to search for anomalies. In a noisy crowd, the anomaly is the one who remains silent and maintains immobility. This activates the reticular activating system, RAS, of those around him. They begin to subconsciously scan Edward, trying to understand the reason for his confidence. When Marcus approached him, Edward used sensory dominance. Silence in response to physical contact, a slap on the shoulder, is a powerful signal of high status. He did not respond to aggression with aggression, reactivity. He responded with equanimity, sovereignty. At this moment, Edward's serotonin level is stable, while Marcus begins an adrenaline release due to uncertainty. The one who maintains a low pulse and minimal facial expressions at the moment of a social collision is biologically read as the alpha. 3. Phase: psychological precedent. Primatologist Franz de Waal, in his research Chimpanzee Politics, described the behavior of true alpha males. Unlike pretenders, who are constantly making noise, fighting, and demonstrating strength, the true leader can sit absolutely still for hours. His power is held not on constant violence, but on the potential for violence, and the social support he receives simply by being the center. When a pretender begins to bustle around him, the alpha only slightly turns his head. This is enough for the hierarchy to be confirmed. In psychology, this is associated with the halo effect, intensified through social proof. As soon as a couple of influential people, like Sarah, showed interest in the mysterious Edward, his status in the eyes of the others skyrocketed exponentially, even though he did nothing. He simply allowed their imagination to finish drawing his greatness. 4. Phase: counterstrike. Nietzsche taught, "The happiness of the overman is in his self-sufficiency." You do not need the respect of the crowd. You need their dependence on your opinion. Lesson number 5. The principle of the sovereign center. To become the one who is impossible to ignore, You must become the point of reference. Strategy of the counterstrike. Economy of presence. Do not be accessible. Your physical absence must be felt more sharply than the presence of others. Seizure of the pause. Never answer immediately. Let the interlocutor drown in their own question. The longer the pause, the more power belongs to the one who will conclude it. Destruction of hierarchy. Through irony. Nietzsche adored the laughter of the overman. When someone tries to suppress you, like Marcus, answer with a light, almost sympathetic smile. This transmits your superiority better than any words. 5. Phase. Sensory immersion. Edward feels how the coolness of the linen jacket touches his skin. He feels the weight of the glass in his hand, an ideal balance of glass and water. The camera flashes of the auction somewhere in the distance seem to him like far-off stars, having no significance. He hears how Marcus's breathing falters. The world around slows down. Edward is the immobile center of a rotating wheel. He does not seek respect. He is the gravity that makes this society rotate around him, fearing to break off into the void. The world that you see before you is not a collection of personalities. It is a complex, self-regulating biosystem where each level of the hierarchy is held by fear and illusions. Most people spend their lives in search of a safe harbor, not understanding that the only true safety is being the one who controls the storm. You have mastered 5 lessons. Now your will is a scalpel, and your equanimity is armor. Where others seek words to fill the void, you use silence as a weapon. Where others display strength, you manipulate through false vulnerability. Where others believe in facts, you create reality. Nietzsche warned, if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. But he forgot to add, if you yourself become the abyss, those around you begin to seek salvation in you. They will be drawn to your coldness, taking it for firmness. They will give you power because they themselves do not know what to do with it. You have paid a high price for this knowledge. Your capacity for blind empathy. But in return, you have gained sovereignty. Now you are not a resource. You are a predator who himself chooses the time and place for his presence. Your greatness begins where your need for others' approval ends. Go and take what belongs to you by right of will. And remember, in this game, there is no finish line. There is only the constant expansion of your influence. Knowledge of the mechanisms of the psyche is your primary freedom. Subscribe to explore the hidden facets of human behavior together. And be sure to write in the comments which psychological pattern or strategy we shall analyze next time. Let us search for the truth together.